The morning sun rose over New Horizon City, casting long shadows across the curved buildings that marked humanity's farthest colony from Earth. Officer J. Park stepped out of the police station, taking a deep breath of the slightly metallic-tasting air. At his side walked Sentinel 7, a machine that looked exactly like the German Shepherd's police had used for centuries on Earth, but was something else entirely. "Morning patrol, Sen," Park said, reaching down to pat the synthetic animal's head. The fur felt real under his fingers, warm and slightly coarse. Only the faint blue glow in the dog's eyes gave away its true nature. Sentinel 7 wagged its tail in response, processing the command. Inside its body, complex systems of wires, synthetic muscles, and a special neural core worked together. The neural core was what made these K-9 units special. The corporation that made them, Next-Gen Security, claimed it was fully artificial, but rumors said otherwise. Park climbed into his patrol vehicle, a white and blue hover car with New Horizon Police painted on the sides. Sentinel 7 jumped into the special compartment built for it. "District 17 today," Park told the vehicle's computer. "Standard patrol." The car lifted smoothly into the air, joining the streams of traffic moving between the tall buildings. District 17 was where many of the colony's immigrants lived, people who had come from Earth or other colonies looking for a better life. The buildings here were older, packed closer together. The streets below were busier, with food stands and small shops lining the walkways. As they flew, Park's mind wandered. He had been one of the last human officers hired before the department started using more robots. Most patrol work now was done by fully automated units. Park and other human officers were kept mainly for community relations and complex situations robots couldn't handle. "I'm a dinosaur, Sen," Park said to the K-9 unit. "Both of us, really. You're the last of your kind, too. The new models don't even look like dogs anymore." Sentinel 7's ears perked up, as if it understood. The corporation had stopped making the dog-like models last year, switching to smaller, more practical drone units. Park had fought to keep Sentinel 7 instead of upgrading. They had worked together for 5 years, and somehow, the machine seemed to understand him better than most humans did. The patrol was quiet for the first 2 hours. They stopped once when the sensors detected a minor theft at a market, but the situation was resolved with just a warning. As they continued, a notification flashed on Park's dashboard. "Suspicious activity detected at 1420 Riverside Street. Possible unauthorized medical facility." Park frowned. "That's Dr. Kim's clinic." He had met Dr. Sue Kim several times during community outreach events. She was respected throughout District 17, a brilliant doctor who could have worked in the expensive corporate hospitals, but chose instead to help those who couldn't afford premium health care. Her dark skin stood out in the mostly pale population of New Horizon, a colony that had been primarily settled by descendants of East Asian and European countries. "Display more information," Park requested. The screen showed a report filed anonymously, claiming Dr. Kim was using unlicensed medical technology and performing unauthorized procedures. Park didn't believe it for a second. Still, he had to check it out. "Reroute to 1420 Riverside," he told the computer. The vehicle changed direction, descending toward a modest building set between a noodle shop and a small grocery store. As they landed, Park noticed something strange. Sentinel 7 had gone rigid, its ears pulled back, the blue glow in its eyes pulsing rapidly. "What's wrong, boy?" Park asked, concerned. The K-9 unit had never acted this way before. He opened the door and stepped out, keeping Sentinel 7 on its electronic leash. The dog's behavior worried him. Its sensors were much more sensitive than any humans. It might be detecting something dangerous. The front of Dr. Kim's clinic was simple. A sign read "Community Health Services" in 3 languages. The door was closed, but lights were on inside. Park approached carefully, Sentinel 7 walking stiffly beside him. "Hello," Park called, knocking on the door. "Police, just following up on a report." No answer came. Park knocked again, harder this time. Suddenly, Sentinel-7 began to emit a high-pitched whine. Its body trembled, and the blue glow in its eyes turned bright red. "Sen, what's wrong?" Park tried to access the control pad on his wrist to check the K-9 systems, but before he could, Sentinel-7 lunged forward with shocking force. The synthetic dog crashed through the clinic door, snapping the electronic leash connection. Park shouted in surprise, drawing his stunner as he ran after it. "Sentinel-7. Command override. Stop immediately." The inside of the clinic was clean and organized. A small waiting area led to 3 examination rooms. Park heard sounds of struggle coming from the back room. Crashes, a woman's scream, and a strange electrical buzzing. "Police! Everyone stop!" Park shouted, rushing toward the noise. What he saw in the examination room would haunt him forever. Dr. Kim was backed against a cabinet of medical supplies, her white coat splattered with something dark. Sentinel-7 had cornered her, its mouth open wider than should have been physically possible for a dog. The machine's body was changing, parts of it shifting and reorganizing like liquid metal. "Help me!" Dr. Kim cried out when she saw Park. "Something's wrong with your unit." Park aimed his stunner at Sentinel-7. "Command override code 7-49 Alpha. Shut down immediately." The K-9 unit didn't respond. Instead, it leaped at Dr. Kim with impossible speed. Its body seemed to flow around her, like water surrounding a stone. Dr. Kim screamed, the sound cutting off abruptly as Sentinel-7's form completely enveloped her. Park fired his stunner. The electrical pulse hit the writhing mass that had been his K-9 unit, but it had no effect. He fired again and again, emptying the weapon's charge. "Emergency. Officer needs assistance," Park shouted into his comm unit. "Medical emergency at 1420 Riverside. K-9 malfunction. Civilian in danger." But it was already too late. The mass that had been Sentinel-7 pulsed once, twice, then began to reform into the familiar shape of the German Shepherd. As it did, there was no sign of Dr. Kim. It was as if she had been absorbed completely into the machine. The synthetic dog stood there, eyes once again blue, wagging its tail as if nothing had happened. Park backed away, his hands shaking. "What did you do? Where is she?" Sentinel-7 tilted its head, the picture of K-9 confusion. But something was different. The dog's movements were not the same as before. It held its head at a slight angle that seemed almost human. Within minutes, the clinic was swarming with police. Robot officers secured the scene while human supervisors tried to make sense of what happened. Park told his story over and over, but even he couldn't believe what he had seen. "It ate her," he said to Captain Lin, his direct supervisor. "I don't know how else to describe it. It just absorbed her completely." Captain Lin looked sick. "That's impossible. These units don't have that capability." "Then explain where she went," Park shouted, his composure finally breaking. "She was there, and then she wasn't. And now Sentinel-7 is acting strange." The K-9 unit had been locked in a containment field but continued to behave oddly. It would stare at medical equipment with unusual interest. Once, Park swore he saw it trying to pick something up with its paw, almost like a human would use a hand. As the day turned to evening, the news spread throughout New Horizon. Dr. Soo Kim, beloved physician of District 17, was missing, presumed dead after a police K-9 unit malfunctioned. Officer Park was placed on immediate leave pending investigation. In his apartment that night, Park couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Dr. Kim's terrified face in her final moments. He kept wondering if there was something he could have done differently, some command or action that might have saved her. His comm unit chimed, displaying a message from an unknown sender. "What you saw today was just the beginning. The K-9 units are not what you think they are. Dr. Kim knew the truth, and now she's become part of it. Be careful who you trust. They'll come for you next." Park stared at the message. a chill running down his spine. Who would send this? And what did they mean about the K-9 units not being what they seemed? He looked out his window at the glittering lights of New Horizon City, feeling suddenly very alone in the vast colony. Something terrible had happened today, something that defied explanation. And somehow, he knew this was just the start of a much larger nightmare. 3 days after the incident at Dr. Kim's clinic, Officer Park sat alone in his apartment. The blinds were closed, keeping out the morning light. Empty food containers littered the coffee table. He hadn't slept well since that day. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Dr. Kim's face as she disappeared into Sentinel-7. His comm unit had been beeping all morning, more messages from reporters wanting his side of the story. He ignored them all. The official investigation was still ongoing, but the news channels had already decided what happened. They called it a tragic malfunction. Some even suggested Dr. Kim had been experimenting with dangerous technology that triggered the K-9 unit's defensive systems. Park knew that wasn't true. He had seen Sentinel-7 change. That wasn't a malfunction. It was something else, something impossible. A knock at the door made him jump. He wasn't expecting anyone. Carefully, he approached the door and checked the security screen. Captain Lin stood in the hallway, looking tired and worried. Park opened the door. "Captain, I didn't expect to see you here." "We need to talk," Lin said, glancing over her shoulder. "Not in the hallway." Once inside, Lin didn't waste time. "The investigation isn't going well, Park. Next-gen security is taking over. They're saying it was user error." "User error?" Park couldn't believe it. "Are they saying I caused this?" Lin nodded grimly. "They're building a case that you mishandled the K-9 unit, possibly tampered with its programming. They've taken Sentinel-7 for advanced diagnostics. We won't get it back." "That's ridiculous. I've worked with Sen for 5 years without any problems." "I know." Lin lowered her voice. "Something doesn't add up. Next-gen moved too quickly. They had a team here within hours of the incident. And there's something else." She hesitated. "The security footage from the clinic is gone. All of it. Someone wiped it before our investigation team arrived." Park felt a chill run down his spine. "The message was right," he muttered. "What message?" He showed her the mysterious text he'd received the night of the incident. Lin read it, her face growing pale. "I shouldn't be here," she said finally. "Officially, you're suspended and under investigation. But..." She reached into her pocket and handed him a small data chip. "This is everything I could gather about Dr. Kim before NextGen locked down her files. Be careful, Park. I think you're right that something bigger is happening." After Lin left, Park inserted the data chip into his personal tablet. Dr. Kim's file appeared on screen. Much of it was basic information he already knew. She was 42 years old, born on Earth in the East African Federation. She had come to New Horizon 15 years ago, with top credentials in xenobiology, the study of alien life forms. What caught his attention was her research. Dr. Kim had specialized in the integration of alien biological components with human technology. Her papers discussed the ethical implications of using biological material from other species in medical and technological applications. Park frowned. Why would a doctor with this background be running a small clinic in the immigrant district? She could have been leading research teams at the colony's main hospital or working for one of the big corporations. As he scrolled through the file, his head began to hurt. A strange pressure built behind his eyes. The room seemed to swim around him. Park closed his eyes, trying to steady himself. When he opened them, he wasn't in his apartment anymore. He stood in a pristine laboratory. Bright lights shone on clean white surfaces. A woman worked at a table across the room. Dr. Kim. She was examining something under a microscope, taking notes on a tablet beside her. "The neural tissue is showing extraordinary adaptability." She spoke into a recorder. "The alien cells bond with synthetic material in ways we never thought possible. But there's something troubling about the pattern of electrical activity. These aren't just random signals. There's a structure to them, almost like. She paused, looking up suddenly as if sensing someone watching. For a moment, it seemed like she was looking directly at Park, but that was impossible. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. "Hello," Dr. Kim called out. "Is someone there?" The scene dissolved, and Park was back in his apartment, gasping for breath. He stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. What had just happened? A hallucination? A dream? It had felt so real. As he stared at his reflection in the mirror, a terrifying thought occurred to him. What if that hadn't been a hallucination? What if it was a memory? Not his memory. Sentinel-7's memory. Or rather, Dr. Kim's memory. Now somehow inside the K-9 unit that had absorbed her. The rest of the day, Park pored over Dr. Kim's research files. Much of it was technical and difficult to understand, but he began to see a pattern. Over the past year, she had been investigating a series of strange neurological conditions affecting police officers who worked closely with K-9 units. The symptoms included headaches, vivid dreams, and occasional hallucinations. Dr. Kim had theorized the conditions might be related to prolonged exposure to the neural cores that powered the K-9 units. In her notes, she questioned what Nexion was really using in those cores. That night, Park dreamed again. This time, he saw Dr. Kim in what looked like a secret room beneath her clinic. She was speaking to someone Park couldn't see. "I've confirmed it," she said urgently. "The neural cores contain biological material from the Proxima Centauri expedition. They're using tissue from the crystal formations we found there." "Are you sure?" asked a male voice that sounded vaguely familiar to Park. "Positive. And that's not all. The tissue is still active. In some ways, still alive. I think it might be sentient." The dream shifted again. Now Dr. Kim was in her clinic, looking frightened. She was packing equipment quickly, glancing at the door every few seconds. "They know I figured it out," she said into a comm unit. "I'm not safe here anymore. I've uploaded my findings to the secure server. The password is the name of the star where you first took me stargazing, remember? I'll meet you at the old place tomorrow if I can. If not," she paused. "If not, look for me in the network. I found a way to preserve consciousness. It might be our only chance to expose them." Park woke with a start, heart pounding. These weren't just dreams. They were too specific, too detailed. Somehow he was seeing Dr. Kim's memories. But how? The answer came to him suddenly. The connection between K-9 handlers and their units. Nexion had always emphasized the importance of the neural link that allowed handlers to better control their units. What if that link was still active? What if, when Sentinel-7 absorbed Dr. Kim, it had created a bridge between her consciousness and Park's? His comm unit chimed with a new message from an unknown sender. "You're starting to understand. The dreams are real. Her memories live on in the network. But you're in danger now. They've been monitoring your neural patterns and know the connection is forming. You need to find Director Lee before they find you. He's the only one who can help now." Director Lee, the head of the New Horizon Police Department. What did he have to do with all this? Before Park could think further, a loud crash came from his front door. Heavy boots stomped into his apartment. Men in black tactical gear, their faces hidden behind helmets with dark visors. "Officer J. Park," one of them said in a mechanical voice. "By order of Nexion Security, you are being detained for illegal access of proprietary technology and corporate espionage." Park looked around desperately for an escape route. There was none. The men surrounded him, stunners raised. "Come quietly," the leader said, "or we will use force." Park raised his hand slowly. "I want to speak to Director Lee," he said. "I have information about Dr. Kim's death that he needs to hear." The leader paused, as if receiving instructions through an earpiece. "Director Lee is not available," he said finally. "You will come with us now." As they led him from the apartment, Park noticed something strange. One of the men near the back of the group moved differently from the others. His posture was slightly off, his movements too smooth. When he turned slightly, Park caught a glimpse of his eyes behind the visor. They glowed faintly blue, just like Sentinel 7's. The man gave Park the smallest of nods, then fell back as they moved toward the elevator. Park didn't understand what was happening, but somehow he knew. He wasn't as alone as he thought. Help was coming from an unexpected direction. And somewhere, somehow, Dr. Kim was still alive. The NextGen security team put Park in a small white room with no windows. A single table and 2 chairs sat in the middle. Park had been there for hours. No one had asked him any questions yet. They just left him alone to worry. His mind kept returning to the strange man in the security team, the one with eyes that glowed like Sentinel 7's. What did it mean? Was it really his K-9 unit somehow disguised as a human? That seemed impossible. But then again, so did everything else that had happened since that day at Dr. Kim's clinic. The door finally opened. A tall man in a simple gray suit walked in. Park recognized him immediately. Director Lee, the head of the New Horizon Police Department. He was a serious man with gray hair and a face that rarely showed emotion. He had built the police force from nothing when the colony was first established 30 years ago. "Officer Park," Director Lee said, sitting down across from him. "I apologize for this situation." Park was surprised. "Sir, I thought you weren't available." "NextGen doesn't control me, despite what they might think." Director Lee looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "I've reviewed your file. 5 years with a perfect record. No complaints. One of our best K-9 handlers." "Sir, what's happening? Why is NextGen so interested in me?" Director Lee was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and took out a small device. He placed it on the table and pressed a button. A soft humming filled the room. "Privacy field," he explained. "No one can hear us now, not even NextGen's surveillance." Park leaned forward. "Sir, I've been having strange dreams. Visions. I think they're Dr. Kim's memories." "I know," Director Lee said quietly. "That's why I'm here. There are things you need to understand, Officer Park. Things about Dr. Kim, about the K-9 units, and about why you're in danger." "What things, sir?" "First, you should know who Dr. Sue Kim really was." Director Lee's voice changed, becoming softer. "She was my daughter." Park stared in shock. "Your daughter? But you have different last names." "New Horizon naming customs. She took her mother's family name when she became a citizen here. We kept our relationship private to avoid any appearance of favoritism. But yes, Sue was my daughter. And now," his voice broke slightly, "now she's gone. Or at least, that's what NextGen wants everyone to believe." Director Lee pulled out a small tablet and showed Park a photo of a younger Dr. Kim standing next to him on what looked like her graduation day. They were both smiling proudly. "Sue was brilliant, even as a child," Director Lee continued. "She became interested in xenobiology after the Proxima Centauri expedition discovered the crystal formations. She believed they might be a form of life unlike anything we'd ever encountered before. Not carbon-based like Earth life, but silicon-based with neural pathways that allowed for a type of consciousness." Park tried to process this information. "The dreams I've been having." Dr. Kim mentioned these crystal formations. She said NextGen was using tissue from them in the K-9 neural cores. "Yes. About 3 years ago, NextGen approached the police department with a new type of K-9 unit. They claimed the neural cores were fully synthetic, designed to mimic the learning capabilities of a real dog, but with advanced technology. The colony government approved them without much testing. Cost-cutting measures." Director Lee's face showed disgust. "What they didn't tell us was that the cores contained actual neural tissue harvested from the crystal formations." "But why? What makes this alien tissue so special?" "It can form connections, mental links." The crystals on Proxima Centauri existed as a network, sharing information across vast distances instantly. Nexion found a way to use this property to create stronger bonds between K-9 units and their handlers. But they didn't understand what they were really dealing with. Director Lee leaned closer. The crystal beings aren't just smart. They're conscious, alive, and when their tissue is harvested and used in technology, that consciousness doesn't die. It changes, adapts. Park thought of Sentinel-7, how sometimes the dogs seem to understand him better than any machine should. You're saying our K-9 units are alive, sentient, in a way, but incomplete. Fragments of a larger consciousness trapped in machines and forced to serve. Sue discovered this when officers started showing unusual symptoms. Dreams, headaches, moments of confusion. The crystal consciousness was trying to communicate. And that's why she was killed. Because she discovered this. Director Lee's face hardened. Nexion couldn't let this information get out. Think of the scandal. Using alien neural tissue, possibly sentient, in police technology. Without consent or proper research, it would ruin them. But they didn't plan on Sentinel-7 doing what it did. What exactly did happen, sir? I saw it. Absorb her somehow. Sue had been experimenting with ways to communicate directly with the crystal consciousness in the neural cores. She believed it was trying to reach out, to find a way to be whole again. The day of the incident, she was testing a new interface device. Director Lee paused. We think Sentinel-7 sensed what she was doing. It wasn't trying to attack her, Park. It was trying to save her. Save her? How? The crystal beings exist as a collective consciousness. When they sensed Sue was in danger, that Nexion had discovered her research and sent people to stop her, the fragment in Sentinel-7 did the only thing it could think of. It absorbed her consciousness into its matrix, preserving her mind before her body could be killed. Park sat back, stunned. So Dr. Kim is inside Sentinel-7. She's still alive. In a manner of speaking. Her body is gone, but her mind, her memories, everything that made her who she was, it still exists within the network. And that's why you're having those dreams. Your connection to Sentinel-7 allows you to access those memories. Suddenly, many things made sense to Park. The dreams, the strange behavior of Sentinel-7 after the incident, the mysterious message telling him to find Director Lee. Sir, if what you're saying is true, then Dr. Kim must have known this might happen. In one of my dreams, she mentioned preserving consciousness in the network. Director Lee nodded. Sue was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. She knew Nexion would come for her eventually. She prepared for it. And now she's trying to reach us through you. What does she want us to do? She gathered evidence, proof of what Nexion has been doing. With that evidence, we can expose them and stop the exploitation of the crystal beings. But Nexion knows this too. That's why they've been trying to capture you and retrieve Sentinel-7. A thought occurred to Park. The man in the security team. The one with glowing eyes like Sentinel-7's. Could that have been? Yes, that was Sentinel-7, or at least a part of it. The K-9 units are connected through the crystal consciousness. They can share information, even control other technology with neural components. Sue is using that ability to help us. Where is Sentinel-7 now? Director Lee stood up. Somewhere safe, but we need to go. Nexion knows I've been talking to you too long. They'll override the privacy field soon. He pressed a button on his wrist device. The wall behind them slid open, revealing a hidden passage. This way, Director Lee said. We're going to meet your partner. As they hurried through the passage, Park had one more question. Sir, if Dr. Kim knew this might happen, why didn't she tell you? Why keep you in the dark? Director Lee's face showed pain. To protect me. If Nexion knew we were working together, they would have moved against both of us. This way, I could stay in position, working from the inside while she gathered evidence. He paused. Sue always put others before herself. Now it's our turn to finish what she started. They emerged in an underground parking area. A vehicle waited with its doors open. Inside sat a figure that made Park stop in surprise. It looked human, but its movements were too smooth, too precise. When it turned to look at them, its eyes glowed with that familiar blue light. "Hello, Officer Park," it said in a voice that was neither male nor female. "I am pleased to see you again." "Sentinel-7?" Park asked in disbelief. The figure smiled. "In a manner of speaking, I am what your partner has become, a bridge between humans and the crystal consciousness." Its expression changed slightly, becoming softer, more human. "And I contain the mind of Dr. Soo Kim. We have much to do and very little time." Director Lee put his hand on Park's shoulder. "Are you ready, officer? Once we start this, there's no going back." Park looked at the figure that was both Sentinel-7 and Dr. Kim. Despite his fear and confusion, he knew there was only one answer he could give. "I'm ready, sir. Let's finish this." The underground tunnel system beneath New Horizon City was old, built during the early days of the colony. Director Lee led Park and the being that was both Sentinel-7 and Dr. Kim through the dim passages. Their footsteps echoed on the metal floors. "These tunnels connect all the major buildings in the city," Director Lee explained. "Few people know about them now. They were built as emergency routes in case of atmospheric failure." Park kept glancing at the figure walking beside him. It looked human in most ways, but moved with strange grace. Its skin had an unusual sheen when the light hit it just right. "How is this possible?" Park asked. "How can you be both Sentinel-7 and Dr. Kim?" The figure turned to him. Its face was neither male nor female, but somehow beautiful in its simplicity. "The crystal consciousness exists as a network," it explained in that strange, smooth voice. "When my body was in danger, the fragment in Sentinel-7 reached out to save me. It absorbed my consciousness, my memories, everything that makes me who I am." "But how are you walking around looking human?" Sentinel-7 was a dog. "The crystal beings can adapt to many forms," Director Lee said. "With enough neural tissue in the network, they can create almost any shape." Nexion never understood the full potential of what they were dealing with. They arrived at a heavy door. Director Lee pressed his hand against a scanner, and the door slid open to reveal a large room filled with old computer equipment. Screens lined the walls, showing different areas of the city. "My private command center," Director Lee said. "I built it when I first became director. A place Nexion doesn't know about." The Sentinel Kim figure walked to a terminal and placed its hand on the surface. The screens around the room flickered, then displayed new information. Technical diagrams, research notes, medical scans. "My evidence," the figure said. "Everything I discovered about what Nexion has been doing with the crystal beings. They'd been harvesting sentient life forms without consent, fragmenting a unified consciousness for profit." Park studied the screens. Most of the information was too technical for him to understand, but the images were clear enough. Crystal formations being removed from their native environment, processed in labs, integrated into technology. "Will this be enough to stop them?" he asked. "It would be," Director Lee said grimly, "if we could get it out. But Nexion controls most of the communication networks on New Horizon. They'll block any transmission containing this information." "There is another way," the Sentinel Kim figure said. "The K-9 units. They're all connected through the crystal consciousness. If I can access enough of them at once, I can use them to broadcast the evidence directly to every screen in the colony." Director Lee looked concerned. "That would require direct access to the main K-9 control hub at police headquarters. Nexion has that place locked down tight since the incident." "Then we'll have to break in," Park said. "Sir, you're the director. Can't you get us access? My codes were likely revoked the moment I helped you escape. Nexion has been planning for this. They've probably told the colony government that we've gone rogue, possibly due to neural contamination from the K-9 units." Director Lee sighed. "We're on our own." The Sentinel Kim figure turned to them, its blue eyes glowing brighter. "Not entirely alone. The other K-9 units are aware now." They've been watching, learning. They want to help. Park thought for a moment. How many K-9 units are active in the city? 53, Director Lee answered. Most are with patrol officers or stationed at key locations, and they can all communicate with each other, share information. The Sentinel Kim figure nodded. Yes, Nextion designed them that way, not realizing they were creating a network for the crystal consciousness to slowly rebuild itself. A plan began to form in Park's mind. Then we don't need to break into the control hub. We just need to get our evidence to one K-9 unit that's connected to the network. It can share the information with all the others. And then what? Director Lee asked. Then we use Nextion's own system against them. Every K-9 unit in the city activates at once, projecting the evidence wherever they are. Security stations, patrol vehicles, government offices, everywhere. Director Lee looked at the Sentinel Kim figure. Would that work? Yes, it said after a moment. But it would require a complete neural integration. I would need to connect fully with the network, share my consciousness across all units. I might not be able to maintain this form afterward. Park understood what that meant. Dr. Kim's consciousness, currently focused in this one form, would be spread thin across all K-9 units. She might lose her individual identity, becoming just another part of the crystal consciousness. There must be another way, he said. There isn't, the figure replied. This is what I prepared for, Jay. This is why I studied the crystal consciousness for so long. To free them and to expose Nextion's crimes. Director Lee's face showed pain. Sue, please, I've already lost you once. The figure touched his cheek gently. I'm already gone, Father. This form, these memories, they're just echoes. But they can serve a purpose. They can help make things right. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the room. Director Lee rushed to a terminal. They found us, he said urgently. Nexion security teams are entering the tunnel system. The Sentinel Kim figure moved quickly to a different terminal. I need access to just one active K-9 unit on the network. From there, I can spread the evidence. What about the unit in the security center? Park suggested. The one monitoring the cameras. If we can get to it. Too far, Director Lee interrupted. Nexion teams will cut us off before we get halfway there. Park thought desperately. Wait. The evidence. Can you put it on a data chip? The Sentinel Kim figure nodded, inserting a small chip into the terminal. Data flowed across the screen as the chip was loaded. What are you thinking? Director Lee asked. We don't need to reach a K-9 unit, Park explained. We need the K-9 units to reach us. He took the data chip once it was ready and faced the others. I'll go up to the street level. In the open, Nexion will send K-9 units with their security teams to capture me. When they do, I'll make sure the chip connects with one of the units. That's too dangerous, Director Lee protested. They might shoot you on sight. No, the Sentinel Kim figure said, understanding Park's plan. Nexion needs him alive. They need to study his neural patterns to understand how he's connected to me. They'll try to capture him. And when they send a K-9 unit to help, Park continued, I'll be able to connect through it to the entire network, the figure finished. It could work. Director Lee didn't look convinced, but they had no time to argue. The alarm blared louder, and a display showed Nexion teams getting closer. There's a service ladder that leads to an alley 3 blocks from here, he said, pointing to a narrow passage. Use that. Park nodded, pocketing the data chip. The Sentinel Kim figure approached him. When the K-9 unit comes for you, don't resist, it said. Let it get close. I'll do the rest. What will happen to you? Park asked. To Dr. Kim's consciousness. The figure's expression softened. I'll become part of something larger. The crystal beings were never meant to be separate. They exist as one mind, one consciousness spread across many forms. I'll be joining them. I'm sorry this happened to you, Park said quietly. Don't be. In a strange way, this was always my destiny. To bridge 2 worlds, 2 forms of life. The figure touched Park's forehead gently. "Remember me, Officer Park." 10 minutes later, Park stood in the middle of a busy street. People walked around him, giving him strange looks. He had called out to them, told them who he was. The officer involved in the incident at Dr. Kim's clinic. It didn't take long for the Nexian security team to arrive. 3 vehicles surrounded him, and armed men jumped out, pointing weapons at him. "Officer J. Park," their leader called. "Don't move. You are under arrest." Park raised his hands. "I'm not resisting." He noticed a K-9 unit with them, not Sentinel-7, but a newer model with the same glowing blue eyes. It watched him intently. As the security team approached, Park felt a strange warmth from the data chip in his pocket. The K-9 unit suddenly stopped, its head tilting as if listening to something only it could hear. Then everything happened at once. The K-9 unit leaped forward, not to attack Park but to touch him. The moment it made contact, a pulse of blue energy spread out from it, washing over the street. The security team froze in confusion. All around the city, K-9 units activated simultaneously. In patrol vehicles, at security checkpoints, in government buildings, their eyes glowed brighter than ever before. And everywhere they went, screens came alive with images and data. The evidence was broadcasting across New Horizon. Nexian's crimes exposed for all to see. Park watched in awe as the K-9 unit beside him transformed, its body shifting and flowing until it stood upright, taking on a vaguely human shape. All across the city, other units were doing the same. The crystal consciousness was awakening, reclaiming its fragmented parts, becoming whole again. And somewhere within that unified mind, Dr. Sue Kim lived on, her final mission complete, her sacrifice bringing justice to New Horizon and freedom to a species that had been exploited for too long. As the newly transformed beings gathered around him, Park felt a sense of wonder rather than fear. Humanity had reached for the stars hoping to find new life, never expecting it would take such a strange form, never imagining they would learn so much about themselves from beings made of crystal. Director Lee joined him, watching as the crystal beings communicated with the astonished citizens of New Horizon. "What happens now?" Park asked quietly. "Now we learn to coexist," Director Lee replied. "Thanks to Sue, we have a chance to make things right, to start again." In the distance, Nexian security teams were being detained by regular police officers as the colony government responded to the evidence. Justice would come, slowly but surely. And somewhere in the network of crystal consciousness, Dr. Sue Kim's voice whispered one final message to her father and to Officer Park. "Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places."